Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Live from Indianapolis, Delaney, you're going to bring us up on the trial. John Riosti, Thursdays with John. John, we got a ton of information that's coming out. Lance, good to see you. A lot of information. I don't even know where to start, but let's start with the easy thing. Let's do the poll, Joseph. And the reason why we're asking this is, have you signed up for the direct forgiveness portal? It's available. Notice this came out this morning, Lance, that it is going to go live, but some lenders have been able to access it already. Is there any reason not to sign up for the portal, Lance?
Bob, I can't think of a good reason not to, because this is going to take a tremendous amount of work off of you. I think, Bob, if a PPP lender had a smaller number of PPP loans, they may want to continue to process forgiveness on their own. But honestly, Bob, 95% of the loans done in 2021 will fit into the direct forgiveness portal. So it would reduce your workload. The other thing that happens is suddenly SBA is responsible for collecting information as well as additional information needed to process forgiveness. So, I mean, I strongly encourage you to consider opting into the portal.
Real quick, Lance, so what are the rules? 150 and less, give me the rules for 150 less. What documentation does the lender need, and 150 and more? What do they need?
Your documentation for the 150 or more, depending on whether it's a 3508 EZ or just a standard 3508, it's going to continue to require the same documentation it did before. That hasn't changed. The only change we have with the direct portal is all the 3508S applications, the simples, are now going to be processed by SBA. Guys, I get 40 phone calls a day about PPP forgiveness, and I don't take all of them. SBA is going to have a phone team, customer service team that will answer those calls. They're going to have an email team that will respond to the 50 emails I walk into every morning about PPP forgiveness. I'm so elated and excited about the direct forgiveness portal. You know, we're still going to have to handle our forgiveness on 150 and above, but it's a significantly smaller number than it was going to be.
All right, we're going to do a tease with Delaney. Delaney has a lot of great information on the trial, but before we do that, let's go to John. John, a lot of we thought this was dead, but there's a lot of stuff going on Capitol Hill under the radar. First of all, what's going on with the SBIC program? We see bills being introduced and conversations. I mean, isn't that a small program, or what am I missing?
It's a small program, but it's a small program in a hot area, which is venture capital. You know, call it venture capital. And I think some members of Congress, and this is a good thing certainly, have identified it as a way to get more funding to really early stage businesses. A little bit different though from, say, SBA, because why couldn't they use 7A or 504? This would be equity funding. So obviously that would be a bigger benefit to early stage businesses. And what I've seen is just a flurry of legislation, and
right.
Legislation is sort of by nature, you know, a proposal, but the most recent one by Senator Cardin would create a commission to study how to make the program more equitable, how to get the benefits sort of spread out to more people, more segments of the economy. Another good thing. No one will oppose that. And the legislation we talked about, which would increase the amount of capital banks could devote to SBICs. I don't know why anybody would be opposed to that. And there's also legislation, I don't know that we've talked about it, that would allow for smaller SBICs. And the thought there is these smaller funds could, you know, work in underserved areas, and perhaps that could be done in tandem with the legislation Senator Cardin introduced. So a lot of attention being paid to a relatively small component of the overall agency.
We're going to do a webinar on this on September 8th with Marty Teckler of Bank Rome or Blank Rome? I think it's Bank Rome. Blank Rome? Some law firm in D.C.
Blank room, yes.
Blank room.
And they're going to go ahead and so we'll do that. And Marty's the expert on this from the regulatory standpoint, former counsel for the House Small Business Committee, and he's the guy in Washington on that. So that is fascinating stuff. Let's move on. Delaney, what's going on in Indianapolis?
All right, so after yesterday, we got to the next three witnesses, and that is three of the borrowers. So this first borrower had over $700,000 in delinquent taxes, and she wanted to get a loan to pay that off. Of course, I mean, I don't have to tell you this. You cannot get an SBA loan to pay off your debt. So they got the loan, and of course, SBA denied it, and they ended up adjusting it to say, you know, X amount was for working capital, and then the rest was for accounts payable. And one thing we discovered with these, go ahead.
I was going to say, now, what some of the testimony in your notes, I was trying to, what exactly is going on? The borrowers are alleging that they photocopied and they submitted documents without them signing it, that there were photocopies of their signatures going out. What's that all about?
So a big thing we've seen with these witnesses is that they had no idea what was going on. They were left completely in the dark. A lot of this was just going on without their knowledge. So from what I can understand, yes, of course, I agree with that as well. But from what they've been saying, the signatures they signed on the original documents were just replicated and copied onto whatever new documents were made to get that SBA loan.
Lance, that's a pretty serious charge.
It is. You know, in processing the loan, you know, we're in a world of electronic signatures now, but that's not an electronic signature. That's a copy and paste signature, which is not acceptable under today's current e-sign process. You know, sometimes I guess the LSP works through the bank works with the borrower, and sometimes they probably feel a slight disconnect, the borrower does. But you know, what was done here, if they developed a brand new set of documents and just stuck a photocopy of the borrower's signature on it, that's not okay.
Lance, I speculate, and this is for Lance and Delaney as well, I speculate that BankServe signed that 1920. That's why the charges went to BankServe and not to the lender. I'm sure that'll come out. I'm sure the lenders will probably be testifying, but that's my guess, because if the lenders had signed that, they'd be sitting at the defense table as well.
I think the lenders are going to have to testify.
Yeah.
Right, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, because SBA expects a relationship between, if you look at the SOP, of course, the SOP today, not the SOP that was in place when they did this. The SOP today says that, you know, a bank needs to understand the SOP. A bank needs to be able to process, service, and liquidate their SBA loans if they have a relationship with the SOP, and a bank cannot push a problem with an SBA loan off on an SOP. And I got to be honest with you, Bob, some of this language in the SOP that's currently in it about LSP agreements probably is a result of the trial we're talking about today.
All right. I'm going to go out further. It is a result. Well, between that and Frank Dinsmore, between the two of them, they had to do the regulations on that. John, is this something that you follow at all? The 504 CDC market, is that within your purview, or do you just listen to us?
I follow it. It's a little bit an unusual program because you know, the banks, the CDCs sort of carry heavy lifting, and they have the direct relationship with SBA. The banks certainly they have senior debt, but that's what it is. It's for them. It's another bank loan. So they're
right.
You know, they're in the picture, but they're not working directly with SBA on 504 as are the CDCs.
Right.
So, but we do follow it, and the main thing is it's right now it's just extraordinarily active. I don't know what to say. I know that
That's fine.
the volume crossed $6 billion recently for the year, which is, every minute of the day now it's adding to the record because it's well past the record of last year.
But,
last fiscal year.
because of carrying the LSPs and frankly the CDCs, that the regulations are absolutely they're saying fine. These are the big boy rules. These are the big adult rules. You better put on your pants and play by. If some rogue actors are gonna do this, then you need to behave like adults. That's borrower number 2. What happened with that, Delaney?
It is another similar story. So I do want to preface by saying this borrower had 4 small business loans. All 4 of them were packaged by BankServe. So the one in particular they were focusing on, as you see, it was a $35,000 loan to pay back payroll taxes. Once again, on these loans, from what I'm understanding, at least from these witnesses, it did say that these were going to be for paying off taxes. Once again, not allowed. So, of course, this was withdrawn, rewritten up to say that this is going to be for working capital again, and sent back in. And not only that, they hid his prior defaulted loans and poor credit history on this application.
All right, Delaney, but is that a crime? The rules say you can't do payroll taxes. So we paid off the payroll taxes. What's the crime? I mean, is that a crime or is that just failure to follow policy, Delaney?
I think you could argue for either way, but I think the big crime here is just altering these documents and withholding important key information that SBA needs. And
Go ahead, Lance.
No, I think Delaney's making an excellent point. The crime is not, what they did simply makes it not eligible for guaranteed purchase.
Right.
But altering the documents is a crime.
Yeah. And also certifying that they believe it is eligible. That's what they're going after. False statement to the government. That's what they're relying on.
And again, Bob, under the 50-10-6 and running Cabers reports, this one would never make it through.
Yeah. Number 3. So they put these borrowers out of order, I guess, because someone had to get back on a plane. Before you tell me about them, how effective were the borrowers in connecting with the jurors? Did the jury understand what's going on? Did it make it clear? Because I know you were saying you were lost a little bit with all the intricacies from the OIG or the inspector. Did the borrowers connect with the jury?
I think so, because they have a much more simple way of speaking that isn't just getting into all the details. And, for me, I found it so much more interesting because it was so understandable and so interesting. There's one comment I want to say, and it's going back to something you said, so they say, regarding these witness statements. I will say I can understand they wouldn't know everything, but it does seem like they were not paying attention to many aspects that were crucial to pay attention to in this loan process. So I'd be interested to know, how truthful this is or if they genuinely just forgot everything.
Yeah. Well, Lance, I think what they have is they have a situation where they're hoping that SBA will somehow the loan will go away. That's why they're acting really.
Well, and Bob, you made a great point earlier. Who signed the 1920? That is a critical element because on the 1920, you're certifying a number of things as a participant lender, and one of those things you're certifying is that the information is true and correct. So, the question, I'll be curious, who signed the 1920?
Yeah. Delaney, please tell us about borrower 3. I'm going to close the doors here because of the sound. Tell us about borrower number 3.
So this final borrower, him and his business partner, they shared 50-50 ownership of this business. they wanted to get a loan to pay off some prior debt. I know it was for working capital and for business acquisition. They wanted to get another business and join with the one they currently had. So they applied for this loan, but his partner had a bad credit history, once again, with a defaulted loan. So SBA did not approve of this loan. What they ended up doing was they ended up withdrawing it and adjusting it and changing it to 85-15% ownership so that this borrower specifically had the majority since he had a good credit history. SBA denied this because it happened within a 6-month period. You would have had to wait that one out a little bit. So then altogether, they completely took this loan out of the, air, and they made another one where this borrower suddenly had full ownership, which was not the case. He did not know of this from what he was saying. And they changed the business name, but they kept the same signing date and the same address. So they completely created another company, pretty much.
Were these backed up by emails at the bank serve and directing people to do this?
I do believe so. Again, there's so many pieces of evidence that it's hard to keep up with all of them, but yes, there are emails to back up all of these.
Interesting. Again, this is not a crime it's not a crime to fund a loan to pay off payroll taxes. That's not a crime. You can do it conventionally. It's not a crime to lend money this way, but it's the crime. But if you do it SBA, you can do it conventionally, no issue. Whether you would want to is another story, but you can do it. You can do it SBA. Lance is saying fine, you'll make it, but you're going to lose the guarantee. But when you go to the next step, and that's why they have the conspiracy charges saying, hey, this is ineligible, and so we're going to adjust it this way and that way, and then submit it, and then represent that this was eligible and it's correct. That's the crime. Correct, Lance?
Yeah. That's exactly it, Bob. There are a lot of things you can do in SBA lending that might result in a denial of guarantee, but the big issue is manipulation of documentation and factual information, and then signing the SBA Form 1920.
Yeah, well, again, and this is what their witnesses say. It'll be interesting to see what type of defense that Carrie has.
But one thing Delaney picked up on that I think is real strong, this testimony from the borrowers probably will go a long ways because they speak a language similar to the jurors. And,
right.
You've got SBA bureaucrats talking SOP, forms, processes, and then suddenly you've got a normal person who was involved in this telling their story.
Well, I think
go ahead.
I think these testimonies are just interesting because I'm not able to elaborate completely, but it honestly makes all parties look bad the way these testimonies went.
Mm-hmm.
The banker or the lenders, it made banks look bad, and it even made these borrowers, not look the greatest. That's why I chose to keep their names out of the story.
Fair enough. Yeah, their names aren't important. I agree with that. John, are you following I'm going to wrap up with John. 504 refinance, is that a story you're following?
Well, it's a story I have been waiting to follow, and I understand that the rules, I guess, were made public today. They're made public in the register. We are in the final stages of bank earnings, so today I've been following that more closely, but I can tell you this, that's a story we're going to be following in the very near future. Getting back to what I said, and I may have misunderstood your question, Bob, earlier, about 504, the program is, I hate to use the acronym, but someone else used it today on one of the earnings calls, and it's stuck in my head, but on fire, $6 billion in volume so far.
That's right.
That's already something like 20% above the full fiscal year 2020, well above 2019, so it's not a COVID issue comparison. In this, potentially not so much this year, I would imagine, but next fiscal year and beyond could make it even bigger.
I'm a banker in the rural South. Why do I care about bank earnings?
Well, earnings, it's as they say, it's the classic bottom line. I mean, earnings sort of fund everything. They add to capital. You know, they support dividends. They support buybacks. They, you know, and they're a proxy to how good your bank is doing.
Do they
So-
trickle down to the small independent community banks? If the big boys are doing okay, is it trickling down in your research?
I don't know that, say, J.P. Morgan's earnings will trickle down to a small bank, but the small bank's earnings will trickle out into the community. That's
Right.
the more
Right.
important
No,
thing.
that's, yeah. Okay. Very good. What else are you working on, John, real quick? That's it?
I'm going to be, you know, the SBIC story that I talked about a couple of weeks ago has changed a little, so that will, you know, we're working on that, and just SBA and more importantly, how the different strategies of SBA. If you look at the SBA is putting out a lot more information. I don't know if anybody has picked up on that than they have done in the past.
Yeah.
It's a lot more information there, and you can, you know, look at the data and see, get an insight into the strategies different banks have with SBA lending. Some go for big dollars, others go for large amounts of loans and small dollar loans. So they'll have a very large amount of loans and a relatively small, you know, dollar volume.
John, I know we're running out of time, but this is an interesting question. What percentage of the earnings call that you listen to, what percentage of those banks talk about SBA or mention SBA?
I would say a relatively small portion.
I was going to say, I would guess a third. I don't know.
I would think it's even smaller than that. I listened to one today, and I'll just say the bank because it was a perfectly good earnings call. Huntington, they are the #1 lender in terms of numbers of loans, and they mentioned it only in passing. But I know it's a very, very important program to them. It's just that there are so many things going on, Huntington, and going on in the banks. But they certainly, if they don't talk about it on the calls, they certainly refer to it in the financial reports and in their press releases. So
Very good.
so it's mentioned.
Delaney, I understand you've changed your schedule, so we're going to see you tomorrow morning.
Yes, one more day. One more day.
All right. Fascinating. And Joseph's on a plane out on Sunday, so he's going to take your spot while you're graduating and studying and doing whatever people do after they graduate from college. I remember what I did, so enjoy. Lance, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a good day.